We're starting off first with the drawing startup options. Okay, as you can see, some of us old timers will kind of recognize that dialog box a little bit. And there is a couple of things that you need to do. So let's go ahead and see how that actually works. Okay, now we will go ahead and say new here because I want you to see something interesting. If I go to new, you'll notice that by default is going to give us the ACAD.dwt, right? Which is actually the one that actually is going to be used here. It is not your Office standard. Okay, so we go ahead, or by the Office standard template. So we'll go ahead and say new here, and you'll notice that it gives us no dialog box. You see that? So let's say, for example, what happens if we go to new up here? And the only thing that it actually allows us to do is to select the template that we're going to be using. Okay, so the question really becomes now is how do we actually switch this over to have that dialog box? Well, the first thing we need to do is invoke the startup variable in this fashion, select startup, and by default, it usually gives you the no dialog box whatsoever. In order to get the dialog box, you need to switch it over to number 1 and hit the enter key and then close this particular drawing. So now if you go here, you're going to get the same thing. You're not going to get the dialog box. This does not give you the dialog box. The only way to get the dialog box is going to be through this little icon here. So when I hit that little icon, it gives us the beginning of the dialog box. Is going to ask us for advanced or quick setup. We're going to go to the advanced setup so we can see the process, and we'll say okay to that. Once we do that, you'll see here, this is the process that we're going to be going through. Each one of the steps in the beginning, obviously, is going to be the units. Let's go ahead and call it out for the architectural and set our precision here. Okay, next, we'll hit the next button, obviously, and will take us to the angle. And what this is defining is the type of angles that we're going to be using. As an architectural type of project, we would probably use the decimal degrees, which is what is said here, but we can select any other type of not the Z, sorry, any type of values that we want to use. And also we can set up our precision right there. So once we do that, we'll go ahead and say the next button here. And this is defining where 0 is. As you can see, east is selected and is defining east as 0. If we switch it over, as you can see, it actually switches the 0 or where actually all the angles start from, okay? We will leave it as the usual default, even when we were actually drafting by hand, it was east to be 0, just like the protractors. As a matter of fact, these two items here are based on the protractors. So what we say 0 is east, we'll say next, and this is going to, obviously, that we had the protractors, all angles were measured counterclockwise, which is by default how it's set up. You can switch it, but we'll leave it in the counterclockwise setup. Next, we'll say see the area. Now here, I do have to give you a bit of a heads up. The area, you'll notice that you're putting 1 foot by 9 inches. That's a very small area. So if your building is a lot larger than that, you best make it larger. And I would usually say, why don't you go ahead and use the size of the sheet that you're going to be using, and then just go ahead and do your scale factoring to that. So if I'm using a 2436 at a 1/4 inch, we're looking at 144 feet by 96 feet. So that the value of the foot value is what I would put in here. Okay, be aware of that. And the reason why I'm making that very specific distinction here is because remember, if your limits are on, you can't draw outside that border that you're defining, that area that you're defining. If your limits are off, you can't. You need to keep that in mind. So when I say finish here, obviously we have our drawing set up, okay? So that's how we actually go ahead and invoke the startup. Once again, it says invoke the startup variable. It's set to 1 right now. I'm going to switch it back to 3 and close. And then you need to close the drawing, okay? You have to do that, all right? Let's go ahead and now take a look at our next topic.